Hi, my name is Lauren Lutz, and I am an intervention specialist originally from Steubenville, Ohio, that has just recently moved to the Washington area. And today we're going to be looking at embracing the amazing, autism spectrum disorders. So what exactly is autism? Autism is, according to Aspie and Grossman, a distinct culture. It is a neurodevelopmental condition that includes the following characteristics, and this comes from the 5th edition of the DSM. It includes difficulties in social communication and interaction, restrictive, repetitive behaviors, and it affects language, cognition, sensory input and output, emotions, and overall the way one views the world. When we look at it being as defined as a distinct culture, we are looking at the idea that according to readings and such, we see that autism has really grown in the amount of those being diagnosed, and that is because we are understanding what autism really is more in the educational and psychological field and in the medical field, as well as we are continuing to train people to be able to make measurable gains in understanding how autism works and what kind of characteristics these students display. So what exactly do I mean by the spectrum? Well, when we look at autism spectrum disorders, according to Baron and Wolfberg, this means that children who receive this diagnosis differ dramatically in their abilities, in their preferences, in their needs, and in their areas of delay. And this often explains the diversity in characteristics, meaning that a child can be gifted and even termed as an autistic savant, or they can have a developmental disability. And I think you can kind of see from my picture of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory that I'm very interested in watching movies and viewing television series that showcase individuals with autism. And I think you can agree that Sheldon Cooper definitely displays the characteristics of someone who has a high level of autism or higher functioning with Asperger's syndrome. One of the examples of this is that in one of the episodes of The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon is having a difficult time making friends, so he creates a friendship algorithm with all these different paths that he creates in order to develop a meaningful friendship. And it's quite humorous to see, but it really displays the difficulties that individuals with autism have with social cues and understanding the meanings of social conventions and pragmatics such as friendship. Okay, now we're going to look at some of the specific characteristics of autism. Communication is definitely one of the hallmark characteristics of students with autism. Some of the things that we observe in communication is students having difficulty expressing their wants and their needs, and oftentimes individuals with autism, in order to make requests, they may do things that are not conventional to us, such as screaming or yelling or pointing, or maybe even going over to an item that they want and just grabbing it themselves without even thinking to make a request. We also have students with autism that demonstrate echolalia, which is the repeated use of a word or a phrase that they may have picked up on that to them seem functional for communication, but to us may seem kind of strange to see. So they may use that as well. As well as in communication, we have individuals that have a large vocabulary, but that have difficulties with prosody, understanding the pragmatics of conversation, difficulties with syntax, as well as we may have students that on the other side of the spectrum have difficulties with basic morphology and phonology in forming meaningful words and phrases. We may have those students that communicate with pictures or communicate with augmented communication devices, as well as students that just tend to be alone and have no desire to engage in conversation. Social struggles are definitely a key piece in the autism diagnosis as well. We do have students that struggle in two key areas that were part of our vocabulary in reading Aspie and Grossman. One of them being joint attention, which means that students with autism have a difficulty in joining conversations or shared experiences with others, as well as engaging in what is known as social reciprocity, which kind of goes hand in hand with joint attention, in that those with social reciprocity issues tend to have difficulty displaying engagement or interest in another person's feelings or methods of conversation or what they're talking about. Oftentimes we have individuals that don't understand what a conversation entails and what it means, and how it begins, how it ends, and what kinds of things should be included in a conversation. We have limited eye contact, and quite honestly, one of the things that we often see in those that struggle with social problems is that these individuals tend to be solitary and tend to be by themselves. And oftentimes you'll see them separated from groups and doing their own thing or being in their own world, as what some people would describe. Okay, this is one of my favorite areas right here in looking at sensory needs of students with autism, because they can be so diverse. We have students that can either be hyperactive or hypoactive in regards to the senses. And in looking at our five senses, we all know, and we teach kids, that we have, sense of sight, we have sense of hearing, we have our sense of touch, our sense of taste, and our sense of smell. But students with autism can either be affected in one area or all areas. One of the ways that we see that is in one of my pictures here. We have a picture of a student that is wearing specialized glasses because he cannot handle bright lights or he prefers darkness. We have students, I know you've probably seen this in schools if you've ever worked as a teacher with a student with autism, having to be removed from a gymnasium or from an assembly because of the high volume. So we have those that may wear specialized headphones to help them with loud noises, or they may have music that they listen to that they turn up very loudly. To us that seems harmful, but to them they can't seem to get enough of it. We also have students that have a strict sensory diet, that may eat foods of a particular texture and color and taste. And we also have students that have difficulties in understanding their space and understanding their sense of balance, also known as proprioception. And so we have those that may need heavier weights put on them. We may have those that have difficulties with balance, and we may have those that tend to gravitate towards certain textures and materials, kind of like this little guy down here at the bottom who needs a body sock in order to feel comfortable in his environment. Cognitively, we have students that have a weak central coherence and that need to focus on single pieces at a time. We look at students that seek structured environments and structured systems, and those that have limited information processing due to issues with connectivity within the brain. And so oftentimes in the classroom and at home, as well as in the workplace that we'll look at later, we often look at using visual prompts, because we know from research that students with autism are visual thinkers. So we may use visual cues using the PEC system, if any of you are familiar with that. We may look at structured work systems, and we also may look at something as simple as a first then. We find that these students benefit greatly from visual schedules, and as well as structured routines and work systems within the classroom. And so we really need to consider that as classroom teachers. And the great thing about structured work systems is that they can be aligned with Common Core structures, as well as, or standards rather, as well as they can be used to align with classroom IEP goals. And of course, we cannot forget the behaviors that we often see with students with autism. And oftentimes these behaviors manifest themselves from struggling with the inability to get adult attention when it's needed, from that lack of communication. We have issues with avoidance, and we also have issues with trying to not being able to make requests. So oftentimes we as educators need to really brainstorm and think about the functions of those behaviors, as well as look at the characteristics of our students and see how much that affects the function of their behaviors. In looking at the ziggurat model as well as the underlying characteristics checklists we use this semester for our students with autism, I feel like this really helps give a holistic picture of the student and can really pinpoint the functions of their behaviors and help us think of specific interventions to help them. The focus of what I really want to look at in this PowerPoint is the restrictive and repetitive behaviors. In looking at this approach, we look at the sameness or continual routine without interruptions, repetition in speech patterns, movement, procedures, behaviors, and interests, special difficulties with transitions, the internal need to complete routine, the enjoyment and comfort from predictability, which is extremely important within a classroom, and that definitely fosters independence, and careful attention to detail, which is sometimes there may not be a functional purpose for behaviors and that they feel the need to repeat these in order to reduce anxiety and to fulfill an internal compulsion. So I want to kind of take a look at the Rain Man in this clip. If I can get it to play. Here we go.
Yeah, why? Why? It's his way of dealing with new touching things, books and stuff. So he memorized who's on first. Yeah, that among other things. I mean, enthusiastic. He reads, huh? Reads and remembers whatever he gets his hands on. Burn the yard. And of course, these people are going to be there all day for this is unannounced visit. Burn this is definitely not a weekend visit. Burn. He's getting anxious. It's okay, Ray. Burn. This is an unannounced visit.
So at school, how can we help those that have difficulties with these stereotypical behaviors? Well, we can definitely implement a structured work system approach according to Carnahan, and we can look at visual schedules. And sometimes with visual schedules, we may need, a picture that's Velcro to be moved from one area to another to indicate that something has been completed, or we may just need something as simple as a checklist in order to keep track of tasks completed. And when we look at structured routines and work systems, we really need to carefully consider some questions such as, what's included in this work system? How will I know when I'm done? What am I going to do after this is done? So definitely looking at this approach can be helpful. We also need to be careful that we warn these individuals of transitions, making sure that, we get the parents involved, that we let them know, this is coming up in the child's environment. We really need you to be on board, and we really need you to be warning them of this coming if something would change. Now, obviously, some things can't be avoided, but we really need to be prepared. We also can consider using timers to help students know when things are to be completed, and give them immediate reinforcement for completing tasks when this is completed. Lastly, I think the most important thing is we need to be accepting of these stereotypical routines and prioritize them. Are they harmful to the child or their environment, or are they going to be harmful to others? And we really need to consider that. At work, individuals with autism can complete simple step-by-step tasks within the workplace, as long as they are organized and reliable. We have to make sure that the environment is structured and allow for routine to be established. We can provide them with visual supports. Video modeling can be helpful. Peer mentoring and job coaching, again, just giving the employee and giving the employer that responsibility in training the individual has been shown to really increase efficacy in the environment for the student. Giving them extra time to complete tasks, scheduled breaks, and according to Standifier, giving them a personal calendar to help them keep track of important dates, work schedules, times that bills are due, and so forth. In the community, we can give them self-management and self-advocacy strategies and instruction according to Steer and Al, which is so important. Giving them opportunities to share their interests with peers. Let them be involved in a leisurely or recreational activity where they can get involved in their particular interest. And lastly, giving them a strong need for routine and daily activities within each of their environments, and making sure that we give them plenty of tools to be able to understand and apply those routines.